This is City and State TV. I'm Nick Powell, City Hall Bureau Chief. Joining me today is John Samuelsen, President of the Transportation Workers Union Local 100. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem.
So you wrote in a piece in the Daily News, I believe in September, about your relationship with former MTA Chairman Joe Lhota, and that you commented on how accessible he was, and while you had your differences, he took an interest in some of the issues important to your union. Do you have a similar relationship with current Chairman Tom Prendergast?
I believe I have a different relationship with Prendergast, but probably a better one. You know, Joe Lhota was a guy that didn't know anything about public transit. He was a administrator of sorts, a career politician, I would even want to say, or career government person, not necessarily with knowledge of anything having to do with the MTA. Prendergast, on the other hand, is a very knowledgeable guy. I could have conversations with Prendergast regarding specifics of the operational work of TW Local 100 members that propel the system forward every day in ways that a guy like Lhota could not understand. So I think it's a good relationship with Prendergast.
Now, your members obviously have been without a contract now for 2 years. The MTA has had a wage freeze for the last 3 years. How do you foresee this situation playing out? I mean, is there movement on either side? Is there constant dialogue? What's the status of those discussions?
There's been steady dialogue the entire way through, if not formal negotiations. There's been steady dialogue. It's pretty interesting. On the odd occasion where I thought there's been movement toward a potential settlement, we see, for instance, editorial comments in the Daily News by Governor Cuomo talking about how there are negotiations with TW Local 100 to put in place a contract with 3 zeros in it that would match the existing state patent that Cuomo was able to achieve. And that's, simply not true. It's a misstatement on the part of the governor. There's absolutely no intention of TW Local 100 accepting a contract with 3 zeros in it or anything that remotely approaches the state patent that he was able to achieve. So on one hand, it seems like there may be a couple of steps forward, and on the other hand, mixed signals bring us a few steps back.
Now, does the recent decision to grant some of the smaller MTA unions retroactive raises, do you think that kind of will help your argument when you're negotiating?
Absolutely. The MTA's position is that it doesn't help, but the obvious answer to that, to any neutral onlooker, is that the arbitrators did something that Local 100 did 2 years ago when this contract negotiation began, which is to take an intensive analytical look at their finances and come to the determination that they have the ability to pay out raises. And right now, factually, the TA cannot avoid the neutral observation of several professional people, including arbitrators and economists, that they have the ability to pay, and their failure to pay raises right now is a political decision, not an economic one. So that's helpful to us.
Now, last year there were a spate of deaths on the subway tracks, and there was talk about putting in a barrier between the platform and the tracks to protect subway riders, and you expressed some skepticism about that. Can you elaborate on your position a little bit?
The union would be in favor of any program that the company would put forth to protect riders from being knocked into the railroad tracks and killed. In fact, the union, if you recall, engaged in several educational programs among our train operators to adhere to lower speeds going into the stations, lower permissible speeds, with the understanding that the slower a train goes coming into the station, the more lives will be saved. So the union was very proactive in getting out in front of the issue of protecting the riding public. And by the way, when we protect the riding public, we're protecting our own families. Our own families ride these trains. Now, the only objection or concern that I raised was that if you put a barrier on the platform and it prevented egress of transit workers up onto the platform in the case of an emergency situation where an unexpected train was bearing down on them, that would be unacceptable to us. I'm not going to allow for barriers to be put on train platforms to protect the riding public only to endanger transit workers. It doesn't make sense. But certainly there's a common ground to be found there.
Now, the City Council recently named Councilman Adonis Rodriguez the chair of the Transportation Committee. Have you worked with Councilman Rodriguez in the past, and what issues do you hope he will raise as committee chair?
We certainly have worked with him in the past. We've had a great relationship with him, and it is our expectation. I have a meeting with him scheduled shortly. It's our expectation that Councilman Rodriguez will first and foremost push for the restoration of service that was cut unnecessarily back in 2010 by then Chairman Jay Walder. That is a major priority for this union, to restore the service that is provided for the working families of New York City.
John Samuelsen, President of the Transportation Workers Union Local 100, thank you for joining us today.